town of James Island is tackling a myriad of issues, including infrastructure and drainage. I sit down exclusively with Town Council member and Mayor Pro-Tem Garrett Milliken for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and download my free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores. Garrett Milliken, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you for having me, Quintin.
You're welcome greatly. Obviously, you are a James Island Town Council member, and from what I was also told, you're the Mayor Pro-Tem.
I am. My colleagues endowed that honor upon me.
Upon you. And let me even go back further to November. You were reelected as a council member for the town of James Island, and obviously you served for the past 4 years prior to that.
5 years.
5 years.
Yeah,
wow.
they passed an ordinance on James Island that extended our terms so that we could sort of sync up with a lot of the other municipal elections. So I was in there for 5 years and 3 months, but who's counting?
Who's counting? Exactly right. What is the biggest difference between really 5 years ago and right now when you think of the town of James Island?
Wow. Well, we've had a lot of issues to deal with in the last 5 years, and some of these issues have always been there, but now we're dealing with them. One of the most important issues I'm sure that you've heard about over and over again is drainage. These problems have been there, but we've had a couple big storms to reacquaint us with the need to deal with some of these aging drainage systems.
How many aging drainage systems are you really focusing on in the town of James Island?
Well, it depends on how you define them. We've enlisted an engineering firm to define some of the drainage basins on the island. And depending on how you slice the pie, there could be hundreds of them. But we have focused on some major drainage basins. And the idea is that, well, backing up a little bit, a lot of these drainage ideas were born out of an agricultural model. So a lot of these drainage things were to drain fields. And then you built developments on the old fields, and you didn't really upgrade or modernize the drainage systems. So that's what we're seeing now, is a way to kind of upgrade existing ditches, trenches, these kinds of things, and make them make sense so that they're better utilized. So that's the idea now. The first step, of course, is to identify those, and then the second step is to improve them. And we're finally to a point where we're not necessarily going to be reacting to drainage problems, but we could be more proactive and go ahead and do some things to prevent the problems in the first place.
When you think of that engineering firm, what are you looking at right now from them?
From them, we just want to have things very well defined. And they've used a new technology known as LiDAR to help us with the elevations in these different areas. And this is technology that didn't exist 5 years ago when I first was on council. It's something that we have brought into our sort of toolkit to allow us to do some things to improve our knowledge.
And you talk about those elevations, obviously the issues of development. How is that enhancing that or maybe decreasing that in your mind?
Well, there's not a lot of development that we can do in the town of James Island now. We're kind of built out as far as our boundaries go for the town. But looking at other municipalities, which we often work with, I think is very helpful because you could identify a natural drainage basin and perhaps not do fill and build there. That's a very, very important issue, particularly on Johns Island. Not so much on James Island, or at least in the town of James Island. But the problem that we've had is that these natural drainage outlets for water are being filled in. The water still needs a place to go. And where it goes is people's neighborhoods. And that's what we wish to avoid. Fill and build is the way that developers deal with lower elevations. So they bring in fill dirt, they put it in, and then that water has nowhere else to go. And that's the problem with fill and build. So if we could identify those drainage basins before we fill them in,
Right.
the water will continue to have a place to go, and it won't be in the neighborhoods. There are property owner rights,
Right.
and property owner rights also apply to people who are currently property owners. These folks shouldn't be flooded out by new developments being placed in places that have traditionally been the way for water to go.
And you talk about identification. How many of those drainage basins have you been able to identify thus far?
Oh, a lot of them. We're trying to look at it in a more general way so that we could serve more area, and we're trying to hit the big ones first, the ones that have the most residences in them. So the idea in sort of central James Island is that we fix some of the drainage issues that are impacting our people around James Island Creek and those neighborhoods.
You talk about working with Mr. different, city and town governments. Obviously, the big issue right now is about diminished energy in trees, particularly on Sutherland Island.
Well, and James Island too,
Sure.
Quintin. We actually had to pass a similar type of contract that the city has with Dominion to try to get an arborist on to examine their work.
Right.
This is very important because a certified arborist has knowledge and skills well above the contracted tree trimmers that Dominion hires. So we did the same thing kind of that the city did. We had a requirement that in grand trees that we have an arborist, a certified arborist, available for consultation.
Sure.
Well, here's what happened on James Island. And this happened about, they came back to James Island after being away for a while. And they cut a neighborhood, and the contractors did an absolutely abysmal job. These trees were victims of bad haircuts. It was bad. They were abominations. And we had a certified arborist go in after them and look at some of the trees, and he found that the contractor had made mistakes. So we had a meeting with Dominion, I guess this was 3 weeks ago, and we met with their certified arborists and a couple of representatives from the company, and pointed out that we would like for the contractor to go back to that neighborhood with our arborists so that they could learn what they did wrong before they go and cut more trees on James Island. So the idea is to go back and fix some of the problems that they created, get some education about the issues that people are most concerned about, and then when they move forward, perhaps let the people know what they're going to do before they do it. Because it's shocking sometimes.
I bet it is. And obviously on Sutherland Island, they cut down a couple of palmetto trees.
Palmetto trees don't necessarily recover when you cut the tops off.
That's right.
They're going to die. They are a very slow-growing species. Some people say they're not trees, but I believe they are. They're beautiful, and they're also so emblematic of what Sullivan's Island is about as far as our history, the Palmetto State. But those trees need to be relocated rather than cut, because as soon as you cut the top off, they die. And you can relocate trees that are palm trees. You see it all the time. Downtown. You see somebody putting in a new shopping center, and the palm trees are on the back of the truck. You can plant them, you can move them. And unfortunately, though, Quintin, we can't do that with our live oak trees and some of the hardwoods. And that would be the ideal thing to do. Now, one of the things that we have done recently at the town of James Island is we started a tree advisory committee. And the tree advisory committee actually has taken upon itself, we've only had one meeting, but one of the goals that they have is to come up with some standards of trees that are existing in right-of-ways, and then come up with proposals for caring for those trees. If the trees are diseased, taking them out and replacing them with trees that are perhaps understory trees that'll be slower growing and not interfere with power lines.
Power lines.
So we can take another approach to doing things in the right of ways. Now, that doesn't necessarily help for trees that are in somebody's property.
Right.
But for right of ways, we might be able to have an effect.
In fact, how many grand trees are we talking on James Island?
Boy, James Island is so different than so many municipalities. You get over there, and you know you're on James Island, right? And you know you're on James Island because of these beautiful grand trees.
Yes.
They're everywhere. It's very different than, say, Mount Pleasant or some of the other surrounding communities. Right. I mean, we have very well old established trees. Mm-hmm. And that is really what I think is emblematic of James Island.
Yes, indeed.
It's truly beautiful. And I'd like to do all we can to preserve that canopy that we have there.
Sure.
And also to maybe increase its diversity. A lot of the trees that we have there are oak trees,
right.
But there's a lot of other types of trees that need to be protected on James Island.
On James Island. Now, in Dominion's plan, how many grand trees were they planning to cut down?
Well, they're not necessarily cutting them down.
Okay.
What they're doing is they're cutting the tops off. Mm. And a hardwood, unlike a palm tree,
right.
can survive that abuse. Mm. But they're not going to look pretty doing it. And that's the problem. We really need to have a way to do a better job. In my opinion, if they're going to do such a terrible job of hacking one of these grand trees, why not cut it down and start with something that's a little smaller, that won't look ridiculous when you do such a terrible hack job? Or the best solution would be to put the power lines underground, in which case then the trees are preserved. But Dominion is rather reluctant to do that because of the cost.
How much will this cost Dominion Energy and the town of James Island?
To put them underground?
Yes, sir.
I do not know. But I've been told perhaps to be scared of the cost, that it's extremely expensive.
Wow.
But you see a lot of the new developments now that are going in, and they're putting the lines underground.
Okay.
And that's a good proactive way of doing things, and perhaps even a land use plan
sure.
For unincorporated areas of James Island could include that kind of requirement moving forward.
Moving forward. Obviously, you are a lifelong James Island resident. How do you compare when SCNG cut down, took care of those trees versus Dominion Energy in your mind?
Well, here's the thing. It's hard to really compare because trees are an ongoing work in progress. And anytime you're going to cut a V to allow the wires to go in, all right, everything that's going to grow back is going to be different than it otherwise would grow.
Right.
So 5 years ago, if SCE&G went in and trimmed trees, those trees are going to grow back differently than if nothing had happened. Mm. So if you're a magnolia tree, you're going to have multiple branches come out from that stub. Right. And all of a sudden now you've got a different kind of tree than you would otherwise. So it's hard to compare SCE&G's contractors with Dominion's contractors because it may be apples and oranges based on this ongoing growth cycle of trees that they've already trimmed.
Yeah. And I know, obviously, the project, according to the town of James Island, which will extend across more than 100 miles of overhead distribution lines through parts of the city of Charleston, the town of James Island, the James Island Public Service District, and other areas of Charleston County, is set to begin to mid to late January and continue through 2020. So how are you preparing residents for that?
Well, one of the ways that we're doing that is we're asking that our arborists actually accompany some of the things. We're currently in the process of hiring a full-time or a part-time arborist for the town. Okay. Before that, we have contracted with an arborist, and that's why we've had some input into what has happened before. Now the idea is that we hire somebody who is part-time for the town. The idea is that before they start cutting, they say, okay, see that big limb up there? That's one that we're going to have to take. Then it's a little less painful for the person rather than discovering the abomination later. All right. So I think there's going to be a little more of an effort to notify residents when the cutting is going to occur and notify the town so that we can have our arborist present particularly on grand trees.
Grand trees. And on the private properties of those grand trees, what are you hearing from residents?
They're not happy. Nobody's happy when they get their trees cut. You don't have somebody saying, "Hey, great job massacring our tree. I'm glad that my power lines are going to always be there." You don't have that. People are usually pretty upset when their trees get cut.
And I know, obviously, when I interviewed Pat O'Neill, the mayor of San Gonzalo, on Tuesday, he basically says, hey, the risk, well, according to them, Dominion Energy's about fire and electrocutions.
Sure.
What are the risks on James Island in your mind?
Same thing. Same thing. Those higher power lines have to have the branches cut away. And where I noticed this, a couple of years ago, we had the ice storm.
Right.
And the branches were kind of heavy.
Sure.
They were weighted down.
Right.
And even branches that were previously out of the way, once weighted down with frozen ice,
right,
were making contact with the lines. And I saw arcing and sparking
right,
going on with those high power lines. So it is something that has to happen. But I don't think it needs to happen as dramatically as it happens. In other words, I don't think you need to cut it back 25 feet from the line. You know, there are ways that I would rather see them cut it more frequently, all right, but with less damage to the trees. And I think that's a pipe dream. I think it's something that's a good wish, and I don't think it's going to happen because of the cost. If you factor in the cost of this every 5-year cutting, I think eventually you could justify putting the lines underground.
And let me turn over to something else that's obviously happening already, and it's happening here in the city of Charleston, and that is the plastic bag ban. You said this quote, passed 1 year ago and will begin implementation on January 1st, 2020. Thank you to all who helped to move this forward. Now on to dealing with the hurdles and regulating that industry. Obviously, and I'll say this from a personal standpoint, I've visited a couple stores. Walgreens have given me the brown paper bags. Mm-hmm. I went to the corner store, I get the plastic bags.
Right.
How is James Island enforcing this ban?
Well, it's interesting. One of the things that our Walmart and some of the larger stores have done is they've gone with thicker plastic bags. Not single-use plastic bags, but thicker plastic bags that can be used multiple times. And I did an experiment the other day. This just happened January 1st. I went to Walmart and I brought my thicker bags that they gave me before with me to see if they would be welcoming and using them again. And sure enough, they were happy to use those bags a second time. On the bag it says maybe reused up to 125 times. I'm not sure we're going to use them 125 times, but that would be ideal. Quintin, one of the things that I enjoy doing, I have a group that I work with on the island called James Island Pride. Right. And we go out and we pick up litter 4 times a year with Adopt a Highway. And this is a great thing. But guess what we're picking up? A lot of plastic. Plastic water bottles, single-use plastic bags, straws. We're picking up plastic. It used to be a lot of cans and bottles, but not so much anymore. It really is the single-use plastic that is the problem. And I think that anything that we can do, particularly in a marshfront community, to limit the use of that will also limit its presence in our marshes. And I think the plastic bag ban is just the beginning. I think we need to really try to focus on other things. And by the way, it's styrofoam too.
Oh, yes.
Because styrofoam, when you're out picking up litter, is a bane to your existence because that single styrofoam cup breaks into 1 million pieces that you have to try to pick up after the mowers go through.
Right, that's true.
So, I'm not a big fan of styrofoam either.
And obviously, after this plastic bag ban, what is the quality of life on the town of James Island right now?
I think it's fine. I think we have a great quality of life, but I'll tell you what, I'm not happy with all the litter around the roadways right now. Driving in this morning, I couldn't believe how much trash is along our roadways. And I think that affects your quality of life when you have to look at things that are so unsightly. It does. But somebody's got to clean it up, and I'm happy to do it.
That's great to hear. And obviously, now that you're back in office and you're mayor pro-tem, what else is in your vision for the town of James Island as far as issues you want to tackle?
Oh, so many things. We have always been working very, very well with the city of Charleston together since our last incorporation. And I really hope that we can continue this relationship because it's productive to work together. It's not productive to oppose one another. And things like sidewalk projects, bike lanes, the way that James Island is, you have city properties next to town properties, unincorporated.
Right.
So we have to work together. We don't have a choice. And to me, that's the best thing that we can continue doing, working together to make these projects happen. Bike paths are a great goal. Sidewalks are a better goal. And we've done a pretty good job here of linking a lot of the infrastructure that we've put in. So that's a real positive thing. I think continuing to work on drainage issues and easements to try to link some of these drainage systems is another thing that we have a good goal to work towards. Beyond that, continuing to improve our park spaces. People need a place to go. And James Island's beautiful, and there's a lot of potential there for more places for families to have places to hang out.
What are you looking at right now as far as park spaces?
Boy, that's tough. We don't have a lot of money right now. But one of the things that we're discussing is the possibility of a James Island history trail. In other words, to link up the county park with some of the other infrastructure we've already put in. The sidewalks on Fort Johnson, which is a scenic byway, Riverland Drive. Right. It would be very nice to have ways for people to camp at the county park, get on your bicycle, ride around the history trail, and see some of these great points of interest on James Island. I think that would be a wonderful way to go.
Exactly right. And obviously you talk about the infrastructure. Where's the infrastructure for easements and sidewalks right now?
Well, we're still making progress. Right now, we are working on another phase of our sidewalk on Dills Bluff Road.
Right.
And that's going to be cool. We built a boardwalk. I don't know if you've been over there.
No, not.
But there was a place that we didn't have a whole lot of room to build our sidewalk on Dills Bluff Road, just kind of near camp.
Right.
And because of that, we had to venture into the marsh. So we built a boardwalk out into the marsh. Yes. It took a long time to get the permitting on this, but it's so cool. You could kind of like go off the sidewalk into the marsh. It's got a little observation area, a very scenic view in a place that's a tidal marsh. Lots of bird action, a lot of wildlife. It's very, very pleasant, very nice. It's almost like when you go onto that boardwalk, you're not even near a road. That's what it feels like. It really does. A little further down, we have another segment of the road. This particular sidewalk terminates at Seaside Lane.
Oh, yes.
And the next phase is going to go from Seaside to Windborne. Right. But we also have that terrible curve on Dills Bluff Road that is right in the marsh. So we have to do another boardwalk again.
Oh, gosh.
But I don't say have to do another boardwalk because I think they're very pleasant and very nice. So this is going to be another phase of the project. It's a little pricier than just a sidewalk, but it sure does look nice.
What are you looking at right now as far as prices?
Well, it's hard to say because we haven't gotten all the permitting estimates on things and everything yet. Yeah. So I don't know offhand.
Sure.
But we usually try to get matching funds from other sources to do things like the CTTC and transportation tax and some of these other resources that are out there.
And how many sources are you looking at right now?
Sources for funding?
Yeah, for the boardwalks and whatnot.
Different sources for different projects. For example, a park project for the trail, that would be Greenbelt funds.
Right.
That we're now decided to roll over for another year so we could get a bigger amount of cash. To move forward with that.
And how many other projects are you looking at as far as the town of James Island?
How many
projects?
Boy, I don't even know. We're very busy over there. Yes. We have a great staff at the town. Yes. And boy, they keep us busy.
Keep you busy.
They really do keep us busy.
And you obviously are back on council, and you're obviously on the council with Dan Bowles and obviously Mayor Woolsey. What is the relationship with City Council and Mayor right now in your mind?
With our council or with the city council?
Oh, town council.
We have a good relationship. We're working forward. There's a little more balance now which is very good. I think it's always good to have balance between the mayor and council and a strong mayor form of government. And that's been a pretty good positive step. I think that it's getting better, and I think it's going to continue to improve moving forward.
That is great to hear.
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Garrett Milliken, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Well, thank you so much, Quintin. It was my pleasure.
Likewise. You're welcome. Yeah.